Come on, quicker than that. Okay, welcome back. Lithuania, cold coffee. Is that a thing? Every coffee I've had has been freezing up to now. No use at all. Right, okay, so this session, you will all recall last conference, just 2 years ago, we were all about charters, and there were two critical points that were being made. One was about the environment, and the network put forward a kind of quite comprehensive, but a very strong commitment to sustainability. And there was also a strong commitment to diversity in its broadest sense, diversity and inclusion, I think we can call that. And I think during the all of the panels so far, but certainly in the first panel in particular, the concern about how we broaden the audience, how we make sure that we are reaching beyond social barriers, I think became really a critical issue. And the survey we saw from the BFI, the strength of universality is one thing, but actually what we're trying to do, I think, is to work out ways to ensure that European cultural diversity does not become something which is based around social class, that's somehow narrow. So what we're going to do is take a broad look at both of those things in practice, how we're putting those things into practice, and we're going to talk about initiatives within cinemas. We're going to talk about the design of cinemas, and we're going to hopefully put together a really broad idea of the practical mechanisms for putting those charters into action and committing ourselves. What we're going to do is we're going to bring the panelists up one by one. They will give you a talk. You can, if you have questions specifically about their presentation, then we'll take those. And at the end, we'll bring everyone up and we'll have a broader discussion together. Everyone get that? The cold coffee has kept you still alive and awake somehow. Okay, well, let's start then with Joanna Stankiewicz from Cinema Without Barriers in Poland. So, Joanna?
No. Okay, I will take it because I will break it. Thank you very much. My name is Joanna Stankiewicz. I'm the co-leader of Cinema Without Barriers. Thank you very much for inviting me to the conference to talk about this project. It's my first conference. And so I already put us in the future. I put December 1st, so welcome in the future. Today it's November still. But yes, so coming back to the basics, I'm very happy to tell you about our project Cinema Without Barriers, which is run by the Zamek Culture Center in Poznań, Poland. Poznań is a city of about 500 people and one of the major cities in Poland. And from the beginning, for our project, the main idea was to create a model of accessible film screenings that we can then replicate in different places. So we launched the project in 2022, and it was funded back then by the State Fund for the Rehabilitation of Disabled People. We are using the inclusive language, but this is so I would say of people with disabilities, but this is the translation of the exact name of the fund. And we did something innovative and revolutionary because we began organizing accessible screenings twice a week. And imagine that these were the first such screenings in Poland. Our goal was to fill the gap and open up the cinema experience to people who had been excluded from culture for many, many years because of their disabilities. As the project developed within the social program department, which I'm the representative of, our funding idea focused on social change. And when you have such a broad goal, you need to address real needs. That is why all of our project starts with a research process. We aim to understand our audience, their needs and concerns, what films they want to watch and when. In the evening or maybe in the morning when it's light, and blind people who often have the rest of the light perception, they can move around more easily. We conducted our first focus group when we were writing the first application. So really in the beginning of the thinking of the project. And that is why the project was so successful from the beginning. But now going back to the basics, by accessible screenings, I mean screenings with audio description for blind people, subtitles for deaf and hard of hearing people, and translation into Polish Sign Language for those deaf people who doesn't know the Polish language. Because you might not know, but deaf people, their mother tongue is sign language, not the spoken language that we are using. Thanks to the structure of the program, which allowed us to make investments, we not only installed an induction loop for people who are using hearing aid in the screening room, but we also built a lift for people with mobility disabilities to open up for a broader audience. Our core values from the beginning have been inclusivity, accessibility, and participation. Now I would also add community building and education. The screenings were meant to be open to everyone, not just people with disabilities. This is very important. The ticket price was 5 zlotys. It's around €1. We wanted people to be the tickets to be financially accessible as well, because you might know that many people with disabilities, uh, especially in Poland, have low incomes, but as we did the research, we know that they want to pay for tickets because they want to be treated as a regular audience members. That's why we put a symbolic price. We also invited our audience to actively participate, for example, in programming, choosing the best company for audio description, or leading a meeting after the screening. So we started small, as shown on the photo. This is our sign language interpreter. She's showing that it was small at the beginning. Accessible film screenings twice a week, every Tuesday at 11 and Thursday at 6 in one cinema, Cinema Pałacowe, which is a part of our institution. Piotr Szczyszek, the manager of the cinema, is with us. And since it was successful from the beginning, we started thinking about testing the model that we were developing in different environments. That is when I learned about the Europa Cinemas Collaborate to Innovate program, which was somehow made for us. We decided to collaborate with them Poland to test it, to test if model worked. We invited two cinemas, one in a town of about 25,000 people, Kino Echo in Jarocin, and Gosia and Ivona, they are present in this room, and another city in a city of around 670,000 people. You might know the name, the New Horizons Cinema. They are running the well-known festival in Wrocław. We tested the model, identified the weak points and saw the barriers and challenges, but most importantly, with support, we managed to develop and improve it. Thanks to this project, which we ran in 2023 and 2024, we started thinking bigger. We decided to apply for the Audience Development and Film Education Program under Creative Europe Media, and we were awarded the grant. That is why this year we expanded, and during summer we're organizing accessible film screenings in small towns in Greater Poland. This is the region we are based, and this has also been successful. The picture here shows a screening in Chodzież. It's a town of 17,000 people. It's a really small town. The front row was occupied by people with mobility disabilities who were attending a film screenings for the first time. And I must admit that this happened very often. But going back to the European project, it's not just about Poland. It requires broader cooperation, which is why we invited partners from Central and Eastern Europe that we share common values and history to join our efforts to make film culture accessible to all. We are now collaborating with Cinema Elvire Popescu in Romania, Tisa Patmosi in Hungary. Eva is somewhere here, and she was telling about her cinema yesterday. Kulturni Dom Cerknica in Slovenia. Gregor is also here. And Kino Lumiere in Slovakia. And I hope Zita is also on the... Oh, there's Zita over there. And yeah. Okay. And I also need to mention one very important aspect of the project, advocacy and lobbying. With funds from Collaborate to Innovate and the Polish Film Institute, we managed to organize the first industry event in Poland focused on accessibility. We invited cinema owners, distributors, producers, film school schools representatives to discuss different points of view and work on solutions that would benefit us all. This is very important for us to collaborate within the industry because we have different points of view and we need to get the solution that we will all agree on. Because of this forum, many important steps were taken, including the creation of the Film for All initiative. Distributors started preparing accessible DCP copies with sign language translation. And now the hit of Christmas, Liste d'OM, this is very well-known film, comedy, has a copy with sign language interpreter. It's huge thing, I think. And we were invited to join a group by the Ministry of Funds and Regional Policy to develop proposals for changes to the film law and include accessibility guidelines for cinema copies. But why accessibility matters? Some data to begin with is, according to the Polish Central Statistic Office, nearly 4.2 million people in Poland have a disability certificate. It's about 11.4% of our population. These are people who might never have gone to the cinema until now. For example, we are organizing accessible film screenings for deaf and blind children, and we know this is often their first experience in cinema. This is why we want to focus also on accessible film education for children to include them in culture from an early age, because we think this is an investment in the future audience. Another important point is that in a few years, there will be 10 million seniors in Poland. About 1/3 of our population will be seniors. An aging society means that the demand for support is likely to increase in the coming years. But also that this growing demographic could represent significant revenue for businesses, including cinema. And that by improving the cinema experience for all, we are likely working for ourselves as well. And let me bring a personal story into this. My dad is the one who passed on his love for cinema to me, my siblings, and my nephews. We are regular cinema goers. But a few years ago, my dad began losing his hearing and had to start wearing hearing aids. And that is when he stopped going to the cinema. A lifelong cinema lover now watches films on his TV with headphones. If a few years ago someone has told him about an induction loop, provided the right hearing aid, and allowed him to experience clear sound from a movie, perhaps even his great grandchildren would have learned that cinema is an important part of life. But coming back, by increasing the number of viewers with disabilities, you are also increasing the numbers of viewers without special needs. Customers with disabilities, like customers without, often come with their friends and families. At Cinema Without Barriers on the road, there was a family who, for the first time, could watch a movie together. A blind boy, his seeing sister, and his seeing parent. And a big part of the success is collaboration. We cooperate with organizations that work with and for people with disabilities, with distributors, other cinemas, and cultural institutions. We share our knowledge and experience broadly and believe that cinema will finally be open to all of us with benefits for everyone. And you can scan the QR code. This is our accessible cinema toolbox, which we published with the funds from Collaborate to Innovate program. And thank you very much. And I took too much.
Thank you, Joanna. Just come and join me a moment.
Okay.
Do you have any figures in the kind of increase in the audience, or is that percentages of
increase in our audience?
Yeah.
Yes, because we needed to have a KPI in the Collaborate to Innovate program. So in Poznań, we had audience from the beginning, a huge audience, basically because we implemented a different kind of promotion. It was promotion based on relations. So we went to all the organizations in the city and we talked with them. So we started big, but still we are going bigger. I had some figures from October this year. Usually we have around 700 people each month, but in October we had, wait a second, we had 1,123 viewers, of which 803 saw Polish movies. 243 attend the screenings of The Taste of Things, and 77 were children at Leonardo, the inventor screening.
Yeah, and they presumably were people who couldn't have gone to that cinema. So that's all new people. That's quite impressive. In terms of the technology now, I mean, things have moved on. So there was a time when this was difficult. How easy is it now to be putting in that kind of tech?
Yeah, so it depends on country. Because in Poland we are working on accessibility for 18 years now. There are organizations who are working on it, so we are a bit developed, but still, so we have audio description. Many companies who are doing audio description, so it's still getting lower and lower. But for example, Gregor here is from Slovenia. He is facing the fact that audio description in Slovenia is very costly because there is no other companies. There is only one company. So I think when you are putting this project on, then the technology is becoming less and less costly. And of course, it is developing. We are looking forward if the AI will bring us, for example, sign language translation.
Yeah,
it's still like something to
no, so the technology isn't necessarily the problem. It's the infrastructure that goes with the technology.
Yeah.
You know, from an AI perspective, that's very interesting because that really is something where it could make a significant difference. And just briefly, when bringing audiences in, or back to the cinema, perhaps in the case of lost hearing, do you have you gathered the reactions of some of those that have got the opportunity to go to the cinema? And is that something where it's kind of loyalty building?
Oh yes, that is why I also said that it's community-based program now. Because we have really, and it was not our goal at the beginning, but we see that we have a community of people who are coming each week, and also with the symbolic price, it's also affordable for them, so they can they trust us with the programming. So they are just buying 4 tickets for the month, no checking which titles there will be, and sometimes they are very surprised. But for example, last week I attended the screening, and there was a man who told me that it's his 65th screenings. Often goes with his wife, and to refer to what we said yesterday about cinema as a special treat, he said that each 10th screening they are going for a fancy dinner to celebrate it. So yeah, so on one hand we have the audience, which is really our audience now. And once I asked if we should stop for summer, and they said like, no, what we will do, because there are also senior people. So this is an opportunity for them to go out and to meet other people.
Yeah, I think if you were being really if you were thinking only in terms of numbers, the other thing is that I imagine almost always there's someone with that person, so there's a ticket with that goes alongside the person coming back.
Yeah.
That seems like a cruel calculation in some ways, but actually it's a reality, isn't it? That that carers and people who are doing that. I mean, this feels like something that's really a very it's opening up a cultural experience in ways that are really important. I would say just quickly, I'll collaborate to innovate. I think it's worth for those of you who are looking at that project and think it's interesting. Collaborate to innovate is also about adapting projects that have already been there. So if you're looking at this project and thinking that might be something we could do, um, they could probably grab you, I'm sure. But there is adapting that to your own area would be interesting. But just quickly, your collaborate to innovate experience, how useful was that to you?
Oh yeah, it was very useful, and it was a motivation for us. I must admit, to test the model, because if not these funds, we will not be able to do this. So we could test it in a different environment. That's why I also told you about the population of the town, of the cities, because we wanted to test it in a small town and also in the big city. And surprisingly, not the big city had a big audience, even though are thinking like in the big city there is a lot of people with disabilities. But in fact, as it is a community-based programming, The small town Yarochin has gained the republic. They are still doing it, even though we don't have funding now with from Collaborate to Innovate. So they see that it is important. So without Collaborate to Innovate, I think we will not think about these partnerships, which are crucial to make accessible film culture.
No, and you added one useful thing at the end there, which I think is when you're looking at towns, quite often cities are where younger people live, and the suburbs and the smaller towns are where older people live. So there is that again, maybe that is a challenge and something that's also quite interesting when we move forward. Listen, that was fantastic. Really appreciate that. Thank you. And we'll bring you back for the final panel.
Okay, thank you. And I will take this here.
So we're going to have a bit of a shift of pace now to Jean-Marc Lalo, architect and professor, I'm going to say this, professor of École Nationale Supérieure d'Architecture de Paris-La Villette. Is that right? There we go. And I think you're going to talk in French too. Cool.
Oui.
Yes, do you all have a headset ready? Hello, everyone. I'm here as someone who works on the design of cinemas for about 20 years or more. I've been lucky enough to work on about 30 cinemas, 2/3 renovation, 1/3 new constructions in France and also elsewhere in the world. Every time you can work on a cinema, the first one was in Afghanistan, in Kabul, then in Western Africa, the Middle East. Small cinemas, very often small associations, cinemas built or renovated by cinema directors. So,
Je commence par un exemple.
Inclusivity and environment is a first. If you look at the dream cinema we would all like to build, it would be a floating cinema in Thailand. It would be short lived. But I love this image. We would have to find this quality in a room indoors with the concern for light, air conditioning, and all the elements that can be part of the comfort to forget our body during the screening.
Déjà de réutiliser des bâtiments existants.
With this environmental approach, we have to reuse sometimes existing buildings. You can transform an existing building very easily with structural changes. You can dig underneath, you can make it higher. Anything is possible everywhere in the world. Even we've done it in Burkina Faso. This is in Tangiers. It was a cinematheque. After the project in Kabul, we were very enthusiastic because we wanted to reduce the large cinema and have two of them. So I looked at three parts: energy, envelope of the building, and materials. And I will then give you a few examples. And I'll finish with the topic of access for disabled people. So the first topic was energy. CNC looked at this and studied this and realized that the energy represented 68% of the energy consumption. I didn't think that air treatment would represent that much. According to the French laws, you have to renew air once a year. And obviously, you have to control the degree of moisture in the air, because obviously when we breathe you have to regulate that. Obviously you have to look at the heating. 16% is for projection and servers, and 3% for lighting. If you think of it now with the LEDs, the LEDs, lighting is not very much energy demanding.
comment améliorer, comment
If you
économiser
look at air treatment, how can you save on this line? Well, the first topic will be maintenance. I was surprised by the increase of energy demand when you do not change the filters. Everything like cleaning up the grids and cleaning up and changing the filters can increase the energy consumption by 20%. It's not minor. We have efficient systems like heating pumps with a small difference between a cinema in Sweden or in Burkina Faso. In fact, a heating pump may be very efficient in both regions, except that you have to make sure that the maintenance is properly done. Because, for example, in Africa, you can have more dust issues. Uh, and these can be regulated based on the number of people in the room. You have now systems that detect the carbon dioxide that you emit as you breathe. If you're 30, then 100, and then 30 again. This is controlled and directly regulated and adapted. And this is better than controlling temperature. In a cinema as well, we more and more control only the screening room. We don't treat the lobbies anymore. We use the heat that comes from the sun during the day, and then the people emit sufficient heat to warm the place. You have obviously to make sure that the people at the cashier, for example, are not cold during the day. You must also give preference to natural ventilation. This is all very well for the lobby. It's more difficult for the screening rooms because if you open a room, you will hear the outside noise, and you will and the sound from the cinema will be sent to the neighbors. That wouldn't be good, but you can use it to remove the smoke at night. Now, projection, you have a laser, which is used a lot now, and retrofit, you can retrofit the xenon lamp can be changed into a laser lamp, and the last point, lighting. 3%. You can use a lot of the daylight. There's a system which is still expensive, but you can capture the solar light and send the light through optical fibers to the poles. It's a bit expensive now, but it's going to become more and more feasible because you can transfer the solar light during the day up to 50 meters inside a building. And at night, you have a progressive relay with LED lighting. It's still expensive, and as in fact, light is not the main consumer, it's not really profitable today. Renewable energy, solar
Renewable
and wind is
solar and wind
very
power
interesting.
is very interesting, of course. The disadvantage, of course, is the fluctuations in power. So we need undulators. And we also need batteries and the problem is that batteries use a lot of products which aren't at all ecological, and when we charge the batteries in the day to be able to use them then later on in the evening, these are big batteries.
C'est l'éclairage extérieur du bâtiment.
So what we can do is, the external lighting of the building can be done with renewables because it's not critical. And so what happens is that we have these lights coming on gradually in the evening and then going off when the people leave the cinema, and it's like a bit of a light show for the city. And then geothermal energy is, a bit trickier, more maintenance, lots of problems with filters, and there are lots of little stones in the water that is used. So I've rarely been able to use it only twice across about 30 cinemas. It was for a whole town district was equipped with their geothermal energy, but it's very interesting when we use this kind of equipment. That was a cinema which unfortunately wasn't built. It was meant to be in Cambodia. It was going to be a cinema on the water. And they have a whole culture around water, and we're working with the geothermal energy for the air conditioning of the cinemas. The scope. So the project which is on the screen is currently being studied for Ivory Coast. Cinema uses quite heavy technical equipment, and we can easily pool this equipment. This is also the hotel with a cinema on the roof, and so we can therefore pool, all the needs for air conditioning and ventilation, and you can see here there's a swimming pool, and that would be used actually for cooling power for the air conditioning. So the scope is for these 5 areas. So the first point is to try to use existing buildings, i.e. to recycle buildings, to share in the infrastructure, as I was saying, for example, the energy, the power that we use, also the plumbing networks. The third, the insulation. It's the first area where we can start to make some energy savings.
De traiter au maximum l'isolation.
So we need to do a maximum in terms of insulation. I will go briefly over about all the biosourced and recycled materials, also things with the recycled plastics. And it doesn't cause any problems for a public building. The renovation of an existing cinema. So reused the, so we made the actual projection room into the hall, and we created a new room for the projection, which allowed us to reduce energy consumption. I will end with inclusion. That's where we start. We start to think about the people who are going to be moving in a wheelchair. We need to avoid them either being right in front or right behind, try and put them sort of halfway, and allow them to be able to have access to the front area, which is something we don't often think about in our activities.
I mean, beautiful stuff, gorgeous cinemas as well. I think the issue for me is, and I think for a lot of people in the room is, I think you make a very strong case for the long-term benefits of the kind of work that you're doing, but the costs are going up, aren't they? I mean, the costs at the moment of all of the things that actually can bring long-term benefits, the short-term costs are really seem to be rising very strongly. Is that your experience?
Oui. L'augmentation a touché particulièrement.
The increase has particularly had an impact on everything linked to power. And also cement and steel have gone up a lot in price. But, what we can really look at is the envelope of the building, the insulation. So to work on the insulation of the building, and then also the ventilation and air conditioning equipment. It's quite expensive as well. It's about 30 to 50,000 euros per projection room for a heat pump, but then you recover that cost over the next 10 years. So that's not too bad. Geothermal energy and wind power, there's a budget about 50,000 euros for a return on investment, which is a lot longer.
It's perhaps an argument for more government intervention and more European intervention, that you need to redevelop some of the cinemas that exist. but it feels like more support perhaps is necessary to actually enable people to afford to do it, because it needs to happen, as you say, and legislation is making people do more of these things. But it does feel at the moment that the costs are going up, and the environmental need is not changing, and it is worrying. So your designs can be wonderful, but it's affordability that feels to me to be the critical factor at the moment.
C'est-à-dire qu'il y a un aspect qu'on
Yes, so I
oublie,
think there is an aspect which we sometimes forget, which is that a building has a lifespan of 30 to 50 years. When I say a lifespan, I mean the technical equipment. So, in theory, we should set aside the amount of money required to, substantially renovate the technical equipment after about 30 years. For cinemas, which don't make much money, it's true that state intervention will be essential. However, there are things that we can work on and which can be improved. There was an example of this cinema in Burkina Faso. It was a new construction, so of course it's easier, but we put a grass roof on it. The grass roof in itself gives very impressive insulation. And then with water, which irrigates the grass, that gives a kind of natural air conditioning in the projection room. We were really amazed compared to the exterior room temperature, how much effect the grass roof has. The second point is maintenance. To have companies which are very close to the cinema to do regular checks every 3 months, every 6 months.
Opportunities are there, and what could be done against what might be done. There's a question right at the back there from it's probably Birgit,
Oui.
I'm imagining. Do you want to, can you wait for the microphone to come? Someone, have we got a microphone? And if you just introduce yourself.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. My name is Birgit Heitzig. I'm the Green Cinema Consultant of the German Federal Film Board. And so I'm working on green cinema since 7 years. And so this is a great presentation, and we have a lot of examples like this in Germany. And it was also interesting, you were talking about building shell. And then you had to go really quickly to the presentation, but I also saw that you suggested some natural materials. And this is my question, because I also did a lot of research. What could you do for insulation? Because we all know styrofoam is really dangerous and so on. But according to the regulations, to have a building, a public building, where we have audiences, that it has to be fireproof, it's only allowed in Germany to use mineral wool. And I don't know if there are different regulations in France, or what are your experiences with this? Thank you.
Non, tout à fait. Tous les matériaux.
Absolutely. All the materials need to be fire resistant. The acoustics, the carpet, the seats. If a cigarette lands on it, it mustn't go up in flames. So that is true for all new materials, and it is a considerable obstacle. When we use existing materials, they haven't been through the circuit of certification, fire certification, so we need to do tests made to order for the project. That exists in France, but I know it exists pretty much everywhere, even in Africa. We have state certified laboratories which come to test a material to see whether it remains fire stable for 1 hour, 2 hours sometimes. With the new materials, there are two aspects. From a structural point of view, we want to give priority to wood, even metal. As it's very dry, metal requires a lot less water for construction. But the wooden framework is often very good. The trouble is that it makes things thicker, but that's another issue. Then you have earth. I like this material a lot. I try to use it, first of all, in Africa, where we have fewer problems in terms of regulations. But I use it for everything which is, of course, without danger for the public. The entry lobby, for example. In France, this has happened, and in Germany, you are in an advance on these topics. The earth or terracotta constructions. I didn't have time to present that slide. We have a thick earth facade which has a huge thermal inertia, and for that it's very efficient. And the last point is also simply to put a second layer on the walls. In Burkina Faso, I wasn't able to use terracotta, there was only raw earth, and so we had double walls. It was cheaper to do two walls rather than a single wall with something that we would have then stuck onto it, which is what another country would have done.
Need, and there is the options that now are becoming available, the knowledge that we now have, the technology. I think these all come together. Listen, Jean-Marc, I'm going to bring you back for the panel at the end, but let's hear it for Jean-Marc. And now we'll bring up Maeve Cook from Access Cinema in Ireland, who's going to talk about the again, inclusivity, diversity.
Hello, everybody. Oh, I sound very loud. My name is Maeve Cook, and I work for an organization called Access Cinema. And today I'm just going to talk to you about one of our initiatives, which is called the New Audiences Initiative. For those of you who don't know much about Access Cinema, essentially we exist because of the cinema desert that we heard about yesterday that exists in Ireland. We work over the whole of the island of Ireland, but politically and territorially, in terms of licensing, etc., it's the Republic of Ireland that we're focused on here. And essentially, in the Republic of Ireland, there are only 3 full-time, what we would call art house cinemas on the whole of the Republic of Ireland. So for audiences in any of the non-urban, isolated rural areas to see a diverse program of cinema, we work with a mini network of what we would call non-dedicated cinema venues. Some are independent cinemas who show commercial content, but the major part of our network is made up of mixed program venues where cinema is part of an overall program, and then all the way down to smaller film club type setups. So there's a range of different screening scenarios that we work with. And those network members, some of them are DCP enabled, and they are part of the Europa Cinemas network. And then 3/4 of them are non-DCP sites. So pre-COVID, we had seen quite a lot of growth within the network in terms of diversification and expanding the network, and therefore expanding film programs across Ireland. But then what we saw coming out of COVID, in general, obviously we were all concerned about getting audiences back to cinema. But for us within our network, while we did start to see quite a strong return of pre-existing audiences for our sites coming back slowly but surely, but what we started to see was a polarization in terms of the content that both the programmers in those sites and the audiences in those sites seemed to want to be able to take a chance on or want to see. So obviously that was a concern for us. We understood obviously the background and the circumstances. We were all traumatized after coming out of COVID. I don't think we've accepted that. But what we, for example, here in 2022, these were the some of the kind of main titles that were selected and shown across our network. And you're probably looking at these going, well, you know, that they're kind of art house titles, aren't they? Well, again, we're a primarily English-speaking country, and even the non-English titles here, Another Round and On Colleen Kuhn, all of these films also played in the commercial cinemas. So in terms of polarization for audiences, what we were seeing was that in our sites that pre-COVID had been presenting slightly, or greater diversity in terms of their programs to their audiences, this was now had been reversed. And there was a wariness from our programmers on the back of them saying that their audiences didn't want to see anything too challenging. So, and in addition to that, the other thing that we saw was that during COVID, there was a lot of movement of people. People who lived in Dublin, the big the capital of Ireland, and other urban centres. They were moving out of those areas, became too expensive. So there's relocation to people down to other regional areas. But also we had a lot of new communities, a lot of international protection applicants, both from Europe, but also from places like the Middle East and also Africa. So there were new communities within rural parts of Ireland. So there was also, potential new audiences here, as well as the existing audiences that we needed to coax back to more diverse programs. So out of that, our new audience initiative was born. Like many good ideas, we sort of borrowed it from another initiative a few years back. But essentially, the whole idea of it is to encourage greater diversity and inclusivity in the cinema programs that have been presented in our sites. We select and curate the initiative, as in the Access Cinema team. And the way it works at the moment is that we select one film a quarter. And these are some of the films that have been selected and offered to sites up to this point. And we focus in on, we talked about, or we heard the word challenging a few times over the last while. And for us, I guess, anything that is not got a high profile at the moment or is recognizable by an existing audience has the potential to be challenging. So things that we look at are things like themes. Is there something that on paper sounds like it's going to be very challenging material, or something that's not escapism or absorbing? Is it about the genre? Documentary was mentioned yesterday. Documentary has always been quite a difficult genre to sell to audiences in Ireland. Also animation for audiences, for adult audiences. And then the running time, which for full-time cinemas is a headache anyway, but equally so for our cinemas, where the running time could be the difference between them selecting a film at all to show or not. So we wanted to try and overcome those challenges. And for us, one of the most important things was, when we were approaching this, to use it as an opportunity to expand the reach for our sites and for their potential audiences. So when selecting titles, we only select titles now that are accessible. Well, sorry, I'll come back to that. In terms of, that's one of the requirements that we look for. And then we also, in terms of been trying to be greener, we're trying to, both for our DCP sites and our non-DCP sites, where possible, we will prioritize digital delivery on the titles concerned. So there's two kind of elements to it. There's the element of actually engaging our programmers and the trust, building up their trust and experience of the films. So therefore, one of the most important things is for us to give them opportunities to see the films that we're suggesting under the New Audience Initiative. So we will screen them at our screening events during the year. And then for each New Audience Initiative title, we also produce additional promotional assets, focusing in on digital assets, again, from a sustainability and green point of view. Another thing that we've expanded on is the idea of added content that, again, might be attractive to an audience, and that idea of that they're getting something extra. It's not just a film screening. And part of that was really important for us was to engage the programmers themselves in that process and all these add-ons. So, for example, around the film Love According to Dalva, we recorded a Q&A with the director, Emmanuel Nicot, but it was hosted by one of the programmers from our network in French. She was a fluent French speaker, the member of our network, and then we translated it and subtitled it. And that was really good because then the other programmers in the network bought into the idea of, well, this is one of our own. It's not just Access Cinema telling us that this is something that we should show. Also, this artwork here was designed by one of the programmers of one of our young people sites. So Anna Slattery, she's 23, and basically she designed this, and then we adapted that for all of the different sites that were showing the film, and that worked really well in terms of on digital social media, Instagram, etc. And then one of the other additional things is we offer extra marketing towards each site that is presenting the film, and it's up to, they decide how they see fit in terms of spending that money. So whether it's the traditional marketing materials like printed flyers or whatever, but again, we try and encourage them to explore digital from a sustainability point of view. So we started in Q2 of 22. So far, we've had 11 films. And up to now, it has been funded by Screen Ireland because coming out of COVID, they had a particular strand. They offered a particular fund to bring audiences back to cinema in general, and a budget of €3,000 per title. And the successes that we've had, you can see some of them there. I know some of these numbers for full-time cinemas in larger territories may look very small, but they're actually very strong, particularly for something that doesn't have a profile, or Love According to Dalva, which, as I said, on paper, a story about an abusive relationship between a father and a daughter, is quite challenging material, or would be considered quite challenging for Irish audiences. And then the future, we're very committed to the project. So even though some of those numbers may look quite small, we want to just slowly and surely build that up, because it's also building up the confidence of the programmers in the project. And equally, once the programmers are confident about these titles, that in turn translates into the confidence of the audience, because again, it's about the relationship between the audience and the programmers, and we support them in that. And these are the various different challenges and the future steps. So in terms of challenges, sometimes it has been difficult to get materials from distributors to facilitate us to be able to produce the additional digital materials for them. Also, something that you referred to, lack of accessible screening materials. We found, particularly around Irish films, that has been an issue for us. So we've had to take on the production of screening materials where we hadn't intended to. Streamlining the process for the site so that it's the least amount of admin that they have to do, because otherwise for some of them, and again it's to do with the range of scenarios that we have, from art centres where they have small staff teams, all the way down to volunteers who have very little kind of time to be able to pull together applications or anything like this. And mindsets, which is always something that is really important. And maintaining funding for the project. And part of that is part of our future steps, engaging stakeholders. Screen Ireland, as I said, is existing up to now, but now that we're kind of out of COVID, their focus would be on Irish cinema. So while we could do new audience initiatives all around Irish cinema, that's a different type of polarization. So, yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. So Maeve, just I mean, a lot of this seems to be about how you change the perception. So in terms of getting new audiences, changing how they perceive those films is fundamental. And that seems to be, you're doing something here, but it goes against the broader culture where we
A me
still
sembra
have
che
this
state andando contro la più ampia cultura, questa idea che ci sono film per persone educate invece per tutti gli altri, no? Formate per tutti gli altri. Mm. Avete visto qualche cambiamento in questo periodo? Lei ha parlato di film specifici in particolare, ma secondo lei c'è una percezione che è cambiata in generale? Beh, siamo a metà strada. Dalla metà dell'anno scorso fino alla fine dell'anno scorso abbiamo fatto.
And we found that, and part of the survey was to see and determine whether it had actually, these films had attracted new audiences as well as brought back existing audiences. And what we found was, in terms of the data, 60% of the audience were returning audience. Then 25%, no, 35%, no, 25%. Remember yeah, 25%. 25% were audiences that went to these venues on a less regular basis, but they did still go. Then 10% were what they would have termed themselves non-regular attenders. So maybe they went once in a 4-year period. And then 5% had never been to those venues before to see any type of film. And when all of the attendees in that survey were reviewed, they were also asked, would they come back to this venue? And 100% of them said yes.
Is that really key to this? We're hearing this right across all of the workshops at the moment, and indeed the panels, is that data is the new critical function, and that actually the value that you'll get during this period is that you're going to know more than you knew before about the way audiences think and behave.
Yeah, no, data is crucial, and that's one of the challenges in our network, because, as I said, the range and the setup is so diverse across our different sites. So you have the professional venues that have box office systems, and some of them are capturing data very efficiently, but others are only starting to capture data. And then you have all the way down to, you know, a film club where they still have a cash box. And, you know, to ask them to capture data around demographics and so on. And Irish people as well are a little bit hesitant sometimes about sharing their data. Why do you want to know that? Why do you want to know what age I am? It's like, that's none of your business. So there are some, and again, that's part of the mindset, not just in relation to the content. It's also the mindset around those sort of, you know, seeing the value of that.
Okay, did anyone have any questions for Maeve? Okay, I'm just going to leave you with one last thing, because the funding that, is that funding something which you think is going to happen moving forward?
Well, what we have, or what we've budgeted for, is we've actually kind of included it in, because we're funded in Ireland by the Arts Council, is our kind of main funder. So we've now included that in part of our application for our future. So hopefully they will see the benefit of it. Although I did have a conversation where I was told, well, why can't you do this for all the films? We are a team of only 4, so yeah.
Yeah, but I think this, you know, it's a great point to leave it on, because I do think the expectation, when we're looking at how we build inclusivity and how we build sustainability, as Jean-Marc was just talking about then, it tends to at the moment still be in terms of short-term initiatives that then disappear. So you can get a bit of funding and then they've gone. Now data gives you that longer-term process, but it still feels to me that we are in a position where there needs to be more longer-term commitment, and that those lessons can actually be put into practice without it actually killing everybody trying to do it as well. So,
absolutely, yeah.
What a lovely note to finish on. So, thanks, Maeve. Really appreciate that. And we're going to have Verena von Sackburg, who's from Wolf Kino. Wolf Kino.
Thank you. Actually, it changed my mind if it's okay that I sit.
Oh, please do.
Okay.
We like the casual
kind
of approach, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't bring a presentation either, so yeah, I'm not big on PowerPoints. Yeah, first of all, I'm super excited to be here because it's Europa Cinema conferences mean a lot to me. They've really shaped me, and they've really shaped the way that I then ended up conceiving Wolf. And also when I was first at Europa Cinema in 2007, given that we're talking about diversity here, I have to start with a positive note that there are many more women and many more mixed ages here this time. So this is already a huge achievement. Now we're way too white. And I think this is something we all really need to take very serious. And I'm not here to tell you that I'm doing it all much better at all, but I'm here to tell you a little bit how we're approaching the topic of diversity. And also I would like to encourage all of you to read or reread the charter that's on the Europa Cinema site, because it's very well written, and I think we're all full of ideology and goodwill to become more diverse, inclusive, and sustainable. But of course, then there's the reality of it all. So yes, first of all, Wolf is located in Berlin. It's located in Neukölln specifically, which is a very special neighborhood in Berlin and Germany. In fact, it's my favorite of all of them. It's the least German neighborhood. There are about 330,000 people living in that area, so it's a very large area. And it has, for example, one of the largest Palestinian diaspora in Europe. It also has a very large, generally Arabic diaspora and Turkish diaspora. And the area where Wolf is located is one of those typically trendsetter gentrified areas. So it is very diverse, but it is also very mixed in terms of like social classes. And the people who go to the cinema are usually still the kind of people, very international people, but nevertheless people who are already aware of art house cinema and their love of art house cinema and their cinephilia that has come through a mainly academic education, I would say. Wolf was opening its doors in 2017 after a long period of construction and fundraising, ending in a huge crowdfunding campaign. This is maybe also why some of you already know Wolf, because we were banging the drums beyond the borders of Berlin and into the international film community to raise awareness of what we're trying to do. And we have 2 screens with 40 and 50 seats. We have a flexible studio space that was kind of conceived to become a more immersive, perhaps gallery type workshop space that is, I'm not sure now, maybe better used as a 3rd screen, but that's not the topic of today. And it has a large cafe bar. And the cafe bar is a huge element of our cinema, because the aspect of the social exchange with our audience and visitors is just as important as is the cinema watching experience itself. And when we were conceiving the project and had already secured the location, we did a lot of neighborhood events. We invited neighbors to come and tell us their story, to talk about the memory they had within the neighborhood. All of this in order to make sure that we're not imposing a project that is actually not needed and not required, and also to kind of understand our audience better. So what has been said in these last days a lot is the importance of listening, and this is something that we've been practicing a lot before we then sort of set our concept in stone. It's also important because when we opened the doors, before opening, we, for example, had a couple of Lebanese boys that were between, say, 5 and 10, who were very curious what we're doing there, and they wanted to work with us, and they started to help us cleaning the space, and then they offered us to do the ticketing and the security. And so whenever we did pop-up events in the space, we had those boys there, and it was really like a very important experience, and also realizing how challenging it is to, on the one side, it was a gift that they were there, and then once we had opened, the challenge was like, how do we keep them there? How do we make sure that they still feel they're part of this space? Which, for example, for their parents was not a space they wanted their kids to visit because we're selling alcohol. So in the end, we couldn't manage to keep those kids, but I think of them to this day because I have them in mind when I think about what could we do better to keep other future generations. And then in that aspect, we were very lucky that a local school director asked me if we wanted to become part of a sort of weekly workshop for teenagers from a local high school that has the pupils from that high school up with 98% migrant background. And a lot of those kids who go into higher education are the first ones in their family to go into higher education. So we did for I think 4 years a regular Monday workshop with a selected group of teenagers. So the group changed every year, but the school then became very aware of our cinema being there and our cinema having the desire to be open for the pupils. So we collaborate with them to this date on a very kind of close level. And what the kids did every year is that they learned how to operate a cinema, how to program a cinema, like the logistics of running a space, but also the creative aspect that is connected to running a cinema, from the sort of like curatorial to the taking photography, for example, as an example. We had one boy who discovered he had a gifted eye, and he didn't know that being a photographer was actually a potential profession for him. So that was also something that I remember as being very positive. Now the funding's been cut, so we had to stop this workshop, but we will definitely restart it and find our own way to finance it and maybe keep it light. So this is, for me, maybe the main pillar in how we make sure that many different people from social classes become involved in our cinema. The other aspect is that we do also workshops for like smaller children through kindergarten collaborations and school events. And I know we're not talking about young audiences, but what I found works best at Wolf is that we try and go through the children to then reach the parents also. So it's not without some evil thought in the back of my head. Yeah, and then the other thing that we work on constantly is how we ensure that our team is diverse. We are very sort of LGBTQIA plus aware. We have a diverse team in that sense. We are 70% female, I would say. We have people with roots from Venezuela, Ireland, Rwanda, Egypt, Syria, Japan, Turkey, Russia, Switzerland, and Germany. So our team is very mixed. However, there still is a long way to go until we are at a place where I really want to be. And also, I think this is something we need to figure out together, like how we make sure that the conference is much more colorful than it is at the moment. So that's me. I overran.
Oh, only just, and much better than the others. They can't count to 8, the others. But the no, I think there's a couple of things in there, which is that cinemas, we're talking about an active engagement with your audience, which is much more about listening to them and talking to them and finding out what attracts them to films. The concern when I'm listening to a lot of the presentations, though, is that we're only in control of that little bit, which is you can make it a more welcoming place, but the content that's being made at the other end also needs to be thinking differently. And it seems like the film funds, the producers, they ought to be talking to the cinemas about how their films are going to relate to audiences at the end of it. If you're being really serious about diversity, but it still feels like there's huge amounts of money at production where they talk about these things, but the customer actual focused end is there's limitations being put on what you can actually achieve.
Yes, absolutely.
You're just going to agree with me.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. It's a good point. But again, the other thing I want to talk about is, again, a lot of this is about perception. And when we talked about mindset earlier on, there has that mindset has to begin as soon as you come through the door. It's still problematic for a lot of cinemas because it requires investment and skills that you don't necessarily have. And it's a commitment which actually I'm going to bring everyone else up while I'm talking to you here, if you can come up, because you made the point that I think is the fundamental that we're going to riff on for the last few minutes is the new realities that we're talking about are that audiences are more demanding. Audiences expect to see themselves reflected. Audiences are changing, and we know that they are changing because we now have data that proves it. But the other new reality is that the costs are going up. That we don't have more investment in the staffing. We don't have and we heard earlier on about the investment in green technology. The problem is that there is a big gap at the moment between the new reality of what audience are demanding and the realities of our own small businesses quite often. And I think what we're trying to do is to work out how you overcome that, and whether you reach a point where there's an impasse, where you just feel like there's nothing I can do. And what I'd like to look at is what is, first of all, what can we do that actually in the short term, regardless, because if you just sit still and say that's beyond us, economically we can't do it, we don't have the skills, then there is no forward momentum, there's no movement, and we need to do some things, whatever happens at the earliest stages. So I just want to capture what some of those might be. But before we start, did anyone else have any questions, by the way? Did anyone, or points they wanted to make? Yeah, we just grab a mic to the front. Yeah, it's coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the presentation. I am Pilar Sierra from the Catalan Cinema Association. I have two questions for Joanna and Meg. You talk about the audio description and the subtitles, and I would like to know a little bit more who makes the audio description and the subtitles, and who pays it, and if you have to ask for the permission to the distributor. And the second question is about the technology that you offer in your cinemas for disabled people to receive the audio description and the subtitles maybe you show in the screen. So to know a little bit more about the technology. Thank you.
Right. This is the question, the broad question I was asking at the beginning about what can be done. That feels to me like a good starting point. Maybe you, well, all of you actually. Who wants to
yeah, I mean, in terms of our project, as I said, kind of we sort of make it a requirement for the films that we're selecting, that they will be available with open captions. But we have had a couple of instances where they haven't been. And in that instance, we did go to the distributor. We asked them, would they get them open captioned? They were reluctant, even though it was actually a requirement of the production funding for each of the films that they should have had a open caption version. So we agreed then that we would undertake, if they provided us with the script and everything like that, that we would undertake the subtitling if they would agree to share the cost. And we used a company that we know quite well at this stage in the UK, called Matchbox Cine. They do a lot of work for other organizations like the Independent Cinema Office. They're very reasonable. And yeah, so that was what we did in that respect.
And Joanna, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I wrote down all the questions, so I will go quickly through this. So in Poland, audio description should be in a copy of the film produced in Poland with the funds from Polish Film Institute, but we have the same problem. Sometimes they are not. This is what we want to change in the law. This is why we were invited also to work on it. But it only refers to the Polish movies. But in case of foreign movies, it is more about NGOs who are working for people with disabilities, that they have their funds and they are adjusting the films. We also have in all of the grants that we got, we have money to make audio description by ourselves also, because that gives us the chance to make a program more diverse, and we can choose the program. And in case of Romania, for example, which is our partner, they didn't have anyone who made audio description so far. So they needed to start with the training for audio descriptors. But we say that don't reinvent the wheel. There are examples in many countries. So, for example, Romania was basing their workshops on Polish experience. With distributors, we always need to ask about the permission, because what we want to do is to produce the DCP copy with the supplement, with the subtitles and with audio description. So the copy can then go to with the supplement can go to the other cinemas, because this is very important. I noted it before that we are public funded, and also it's a way of making in a sense about sustainability, because making audio description is a long term process, and it's a lot of work. It's costly. So making it for 1 or 2 screenings at our cinema, it just doesn't make sense. So what we want to do is that distributors will give this copy to other cinemas in all Poland to play this film, and in this way it will be more ecological, because this work that we put in will be then expanded. Yeah, and the technology, there are 2 ways in Poland. One is the receivers. Yeah, it's something like this that we are having for translation, and the other thing, we have 2 applications which are running with your smartphones, and I think in Spain you can also have it.
That's great, very comprehensive. But I think that, and I think when we're going through, I just was trying to make a list of how we address these new realities. So you've already got a whole load of things here. Embrace technology seems to me fundamental, even though there's a requirement for training and skills, which again, this may be something that makes you apply to the boot camp approach that we're now taking, is that that technology is available, it is affordable, but it requires training. I think when we look at when we're looking at captions, I think AI may actually play a very big role in this in the long run at bringing down prices. What I'm going to do is go through these, and you're going to stop me if there's any that you've got to add. Recruitment of staff seems to me another one that's come through. When you're in your recruitment process, looking at how reflective they are of your strategy and what skills they might bring, feels to me like something that could be done regardless of the situation that we're in. Maeve, and I think this, we had those charters last year. You're saying if you commit and say, we will not take a film that does not have this, that does give you a certain amount of power, and it may be that actually you find a positive response from distributors. But setting yourself rules and an agenda can be quite strong on that. I think partnership is really critical here, but partners include funders and distributors. They're industry partners too, and they may enable you through collaboration to scale up. And I think that is something that we're all saying, is that scaling up could become the essential part of this, that if you can't afford it yourself and you feel like you can't move forward, well, working with lots of other people in exactly the same situation might give you that power and that ability to do things that perhaps you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And then the other thing that I'd got on there was that data has become so essential here. Just from Jean-Marc's point of view, I think actually, although a lot of these are expensive and difficult, again, collaboration could play a part in that. I think understanding, not actually having an understanding of what works and the long-term benefits of those changes. I think just keeping yourself informed feels like quite a big thing that you can do without spending much money. But are there other things architecturally that you could be doing without spending a lot of money?
Oui. C'est toujours difficile effectivement d'intervenir.
Yes, absolutely. It's always difficult to intervene as an architect because we're here and we make you spend money. But the important thing is to set priorities. From time to time, I build housing, private housing as well, and I realized that private citizens were ready to have something smaller, but with wooden structures or natural materials, which are on average 15% more expensive because they're not built in a big series, mass series. But I didn't answer the question about natural insulation earlier. You have hemp, you have recycled clothes that are turned into acoustic insulation.
Immediately, and as you say, understanding the materials, understanding how to recycle, there are things that we can do immediately which have sustainability effect. I think what we're saying for the panel as a whole is the thing we can't afford to do is to say it's too expensive and we're not going to do anything. That feels to me like that has happened in this industry and in all industries. And it happened with recycling at the start. There was a feeling that what difference does it make if I put my recycling in this bin when China's doing whatever? But that necessity for just acting feels to me like even if they are small steps towards a bigger vision, feels to me like still an essential thing. Does anyone disagree or agree with that?
I just disagree with the data part for myself. I mean, I never thought I would say that, but perhaps also Berlin is a little anachronistic and people are super skeptical of any sort of data collection, even paying with cards and stuff. So I don't look at all at any data. I look at numbers, and I'm quite happy for ourselves in practicing the sort of like on-site listening, watching, being in a dialogue. And I'm not against your data collection at all. I'm just saying like there is still the elements that just like works with heart to heart kind of contact.
Oh, completely agree. I mean, the core of our work is conversations with our sites, and they in turn, it's very much a kind of an emotional kind of connection. But I suppose when you're talking to stakeholders and funders, often they like going, yeah, that's grand, but where's the evidence? And for them, the evidence is the numbers, the data, whatever that is.
I would also argue that is data in itself. If someone comes into your cinema and they talk to you and you write it down or you act on it, that's data.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
it is perhaps that's a good way to kind of to kind of wrap and round that thing up, because actually we think in terms of big data. I think we think that again it's about inaction from feeling that we can't do anything. Is that the big data we see that's driving the algorithms, driving those streamers, is feels like what is happening in this big corporate world. At the other end of this, it feels, and I think you express this very well in the work that you're doing, is there is another side to that, which is almost like counter, but there's a difference. That big data tries to capture audiences as little numbers, binary numbers in a sheet somewhere. Those numbers are human beings for you. They are people that you can know, that you can see, that you can look out. And when you say it's a very white audience, that's already a piece of observation that you only get when you actually sit in front of people. And I think that sense that we have something specific, which is that community relationship, and all of you in your different ways, I think, are building on community relationships and building that kind of knowledge. The question is how we listen and how we act. And the question I think for all of you is when you see charters that make big commitments towards green change and towards inclusion, you've got to live it some way, and it is possible to live that, but it's the mindset change that perhaps needs to be put in place before anything else, and not allowing yourself to feel I can't afford anything, therefore inaction is acceptable. And I think that perhaps is a reasonable summary. Do you think? Yeah. Should we go and eat some lunch?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
you. Thanks, that's great.